Well, it seems like ages ago we started a study on the Beatitudes, and because of various factors, we've had a lot of interruptions. But I do want to finish that study out today. The Beatitudes are so fundamental to the teaching of Jesus. The words there, they are so valuable to our lives and meaningful. And we ask the question, what does it mean to be blessed? This was a way of thinking and preaching and teaching that was in fact prophetic. The prophets of the Old Testament used blessings as a means of teaching, and Jesus picks up that mantle and he begins to talk about God's special blessings upon those of you who would end up following Jesus. So what Jesus does here for us is he establishes some very beautiful things that give us relationship clarity between us and our God. And then we can enjoy the outcome of the way that we live honoring him. But the real idea behind the Beatitudes is that God loves you and that God cherishes you. And it was actually a way of teaching that was very familiar as Jesus sits down on the mountainside and he has this multitude of followers who gathered around him to hear him teach. This is something that they would have been familiar with and then surprised in the way that Jesus teaches it. So let me explain what I mean by that. 175 years before Jesus was born, there was a very famous Jewish rabbi called Yeshua ben Sira. And he wrote a document called The Wisdom of Ben Sira, 175 years before Jesus was born. And so what he did was he wrote his own version, just like the prophets had done in the Old Testament. He wrote his own version of the Beatitudes, a full 150, 175 years before Jesus. And it was very, very incredibly popular even in Jesus' day. In fact, many of the people who were Jews in Jesus' time would have been very familiar with this list. And so I want you to listen to some of Yeshua ben Sira's Beatitudes. I'm going to read some of them. I want you to listen to them. Blessed is the man who will see the downfall of his foes. Blessed is the one who does not serve an inferior. Blessed is the one who speaks to attentive listeners. Those were very well known in Jesus' day. And so, one of the sections in the Wisdom of Ben Sira, would basically be saying, how do you know God is for you? And the answer would be because you win at everything you do. Sounds like some popular televangelists today. But this guy, Ben Sira's writing this. He's a very, very popular Jewish teacher. And he's basically telling people, seek admiration and never step down below your current social status. And this is the message. Just imagine this, okay? This is the message that the poor, the hurting, the sick, sinful people, they all knew this message from Ben Sira. They all had it nearly memorized. And so when Jesus begins his incredible Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, and he begins with the words, blessed are, the hearers, being familiar with Ben Sira, would have said, oh, yeah, this is very, very familiar. You're going to talk to us about the healthy, wealthy, and wise, how awesome they are, and we hope that you, Jesus, can make us become healthy, wealthy, and wise. That's exactly what he doesn't do. Instead, he's going to express God's love for them in the worst of circumstances. So he says here, blessed are, surprise, you're actually the fortunate ones. You are the ones that God loves and cherishes. It's reminiscent of the story that Jesus told about the rich man and Lazarus and how the tables were turned. It was actually Lazarus that God actually really, really loved. And so I want us to look at these upside down Beatitudes, very different from the type of Beatitudes that the people would have been used to hearing. I want to put them in three big categories. In verses 3 through 6, we'll call those the need Beatitudes. We need something. In verses 7 through 9, we'll see the service Beatitudes. Here's how we serve. And then in verses 10 through 12, we'll read about the hurt Beatitudes, where we've received what we needed. We are serving God, but we're actually going to be persecuted for it in the process. So let's start out with those need Beatitudes. Picking up Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, verse 3 says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied." I think in this section, we're learning that God especially cares about our hurts and our needs. When Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," I don't think he's talking about money. There are sections where Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor." But I think he's really talking about our attitude, our spiritual status, our humility before God. These are people who literally are poor. Nobody admires them. And they don't believe that they're worth very much in the eyes of God. But this is a powerful way for us to remember that common people receive Jesus gladly, and that Jesus is saying, when you approach God with this kind of spiritual humility and a poverty where you don't bring anything to the table, it's a very powerful section where Jesus is saying, you matter to God. This is the proper way to approach him. And then Jesus says in verse 4, "Blessed are they who mourn." Now remember to read some of these together. A lot of times we just categorize them off by themselves as if they're standalone proverbs. But what were they mourning about in verse 4? Well, if you read verse 6, it says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst." When was the last time that you starved for food, or the last time you fasted? It's not enjoyable at all. And Jesus is saying, compare that to the desire for what you need to be longing for righteousness, the right relationship between God and yourself, and between yourself and other people. We're reminded of the great text of Micah chapter 6 and verse 8 where the prophet writes and says, "He has told you, O man, what is good, and what has the Lord required of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God." These sound very much like the Beatitudes. And so Jesus says, you are blessed because you notice something that God notices. All is not right in the world, and God is going to do something about it, and you are hungering for that. And you're mourning, verse 4, when you see tragedy in the world and broken lives and broken relationships. It grieves you. In other words, you care about the kinds of things that God cares about. When you look in the Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16, it says there are 6 things the Lord hates. Yeah, that's in the Bible. And then it says 7 things that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. Then we come to verse 5, and Jesus says, "Blessed are those who are gentle." I think this is God's bless you to people in the world who are powerless and are in really awful situation. In fact, it is the people in the kingdom of Jesus who are going to be inheriting everything that's valuable. So as you look at this first block of Beatitudes, Jesus is saying these are God's way of saying, I am with you. To those of you who are hurting in a godless world, and you're mourning over that, and you have a spiritual poverty and humility about yourself, and you're yearning for God, you're hungering and thirsting after those things that are right and righteousness, and a rightness between yourself and God, and a rightness between yourself and other people. These are powerful ways for Jesus to say that God is with you. And that now in the arrival of Jesus, something's happening that's changing the entire world, that the kingdom of Jesus has arrived. And so this first section is God especially cares about our hurts. There's a second section we call the service Beatitudes. We pick it in verse 7. "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." And so I think this section we could say that Jesus especially loves those who share his mercy with other people. You look at that verse 7, blessed are the merciful. Mercy is sort of this act of compassion toward people who are hurting. And so you pay attention, you do small acts of mercy, you reenact what Jesus does in his own life, and the kingdom starts spreading. This reminds me of the great story Jesus told of the Good Samaritan, where the point of that story is being merciful and going and doing likewise, Jesus says, as the story comes to its conclusion. He also says, blessed are the pure in heart. And the greatest of all promises is attached to this beatitude, for they shall see God. And so what the people who will follow Jesus really care about, they don't really care about, Yeshua ben Sira and his beatitudes about being superior to other people. What they really care about is simply seeing God, knowing him intimately, experiencing the promise that one day we shall stand face to face with him. That's the greatest of all rewards. And then in verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers. Verse 8, they shall be called children of God. Verse 9. So you think about peace. Peace in the Bible is shalom. It is well-being in every relationship. And so if you're bothered by the broken world and you're doing small acts of mercy toward people, you're going to find yourself in moments with people's broken lives and helping them find reconciliation. Now, there are going to be people who don't like you because of that. And so if I begin to adopt Jesus' view of the world and his kingdom, and I see myself as somebody that God is with and that God is for, and then I try to go out and be this kind of person, I might expect to happen in my life the last two Beatitudes, which he mentions, which extends from verse 10 down through verse 12, where, let's read that. He says, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And so for this third and final section, we could say that Jesus especially rewards those who are despised for his sake. He says, blessed are the persecuted. Verse 10, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. People are going to attribute false motives to you when you do the right thing, when you live the way Jesus wants you to live. Expect it and be ready for it. I want you just to remember, though, it doesn't matter if these people are after you. You go ahead and you do the thing that Jesus wants you to do. Your passion should be to do right because you want to follow Jesus and you want to one day see the face of Jesus. And so in verse 11, blessed are you when you are reviled and others persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. He says, rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. They persecuted the prophets this way. Notice the order there. Jesus doesn't say, do these things so that you can be blessed. He says essentially, I am blessing you and God is blessing you so that you can do these things. And so do you feel unimportant, and are you hurting, and do you love the things that God loves, and do you care about the kinds of things that God cares about, and you wish those things would happen in the world? Well, here's the good news. Jesus says, you are the one then that God loves, and you are the one that God is for. For those of you with a lot to lose in hearing Jesus' message, this blessing becomes essentially a challenge, because when you live under the reign of King Jesus, he exposes the kingdoms that we've built up in our own lives. He demands to reign in our own hearts and our own lives. He's out conquering evil, healing and redeeming people, and he wants us to be part of that. So as we close just this cursory overview of the Beatitudes, I want to just take a step back from all the Beatitudes, and I want you to think with me for 2 seconds. whose portrait are we really seeing here? Is there someone that you can think of who lived his life in poor circumstances, who mourned over the hurts in people's lives, who always lived life humbly before his God, who thirsted for righteousness, even above food and drink, who behaved mercifully toward others, who was pure in his every action and thought, who brought peace and wellness into people's lives. And for all of that, he was persecuted and he was reviled.
In Jesus' name, his love is burning in our hearts like living flame.